Perfect. Yeah, thanks very much, Amy, and thanks for getting this kicked off. As Amy said, I'm Jonathan Bragg, and we're here with two of, I'll say, my esteemed colleagues from Patterson Companies. We had a great project together, and we love talking about it. So we're here today to kind of go through a success story around using Fiori for service technicians. And first of all, with me is Blane Beebe. Blane was served as the product owner, and I'll kind of call him, more of our lead visionary of how we were getting through the service process with end users. And we also have Carly Strey, who served as one of the IT team experts on a lot of the back-end logic, a lot of the testing scenarios, and pretty much everything we needed to make this work together with how Patterson really uses their service scenarios. So we have 30 minutes today, a little bit of housekeeping. Both Amy and Carly will be monitoring the chat. If you have questions, enter those in the Q&A or the chat box. We'll make sure and monitor that. We'll try to save a little bit of time at the end for Q&A. But yeah, we got a lot of content to get through, so I'll go ahead and jump off and get started. And but the first things we really try to do with folks is really ground people that haven't heard or haven't gone through a design thinking engagement before. And we started using this slide, and it's a little bit busy, but it explains the entire process that we can go through within a design thinking engagement. And so we look at the top and we see scope, discover, frame, and deliver as kind of our main phases of a design thinking engagement. And at the very bottom, you see all of the different activities that can happen during each of these phases. It doesn't mean that every design thinking engagement goes through absolutely every one of these activities, but they're big highlights on what we can get to during one of these engagements. So really what we're going to cover here with the Patterson story is mostly in the discover, the framing, and the delivery phases of this. So we're going out and we're doing research or watching end users really in their environments and bringing that to speed. We're also going through that full in-person workshop, which Blane will take through some of their findings and learnings about going through that experience. And then moving into the delivery phase where we know coming out of design thinking exactly what we're going to develop and deliver along the way. So that just kind of wanted to ground people in kind of that process beforehand, and we'll get some big inputs there from the Patterson team. We also, Mindset's one of the esteemed App House Network members. So we have a accredited SAP design space within our building and our offices in the Twin Cities in Minneapolis. It's a creative, fun space to get people out of their normal work environments. Shut the laptops, don't check emails, and you can really collaborate together in this cool space, both for networking and going through our design thinking engagement together as a full team. And that's with IT members, business service users, leadership members, mindset team members, et cetera, along the way. And then last but not least, before I hand over to Blane, one activity that we did before we got into the full design thinking engagement in person was I had the opportunity of riding around with service techs. So coming in from a layman's perspective, I really just wanted to watch their day-to-day, right? Put yourselves in their shoes, really empathize with how they go through their processes and see how they were using a previous system to make sure we can take those learnings, those pictures, those experiences that I went through to discover and really validate all of the pain points that we were seeing to move forward in the project. But yeah, that's my high level. I want to make sure that both Blane and Carly can kind of take over from here, and so I'll kind of be the slide master for you, Blane, and go ahead and take it away.
All right, thanks, Jonathan. So, as Jonathan mentioned, I think it was great for him to get out in the field, really talk to some of our technicians and see, what their pain points were. They were previously, I should say, using CRM on their laptop to enter service orders, and it was very painful. There wasn't a lot of boundaries in the system. They could do things in different orders. So from a business perspective, we weren't getting consistent data, consistent process, those things. So really what we did, as John mentioned, we had that great space at Mindset. We got a group together of end users. So it was people that did scheduling, it was service technicians, it was service leadership. And we really just wanted to collaborate and understand, what are these pain points? What do we need to solve for? And so we really looked at, what's current state? What are we doing? How do we complete service orders? And then from there, kind of going into ideation and figuring out, how do we want this to look differently in the future? So we built some mock-ups of kind of the launch pad, which is, think of it as like the home screen in Fiori, where they can go to different tiles and do things like view their schedule or view their open orders or look at their inventory. And we just at a high level kind of talked about what the functionality needed to be for those different tiles. And then from there, kind of got into some higher res mockups and things. So if you want to go to the next one, John. So just to kind of talk about design thinking in general and how we really leverage this with Fiori. We really had user involvement early and often throughout this process, which is critical, right? Carly and myself aren't out doing service orders every day. We don't know truly what the pain points are. So we wanted to make sure this was designed by techs for techs. And because this was a completely new user interface, they're going from CRM on their laptop to a mobile Fiori app, we knew it was going to be really critical to fully understand what their needs were and to be able to get feedback in real time. So as we went through, obviously in the design process, they were heavily involved, but also as we went through the development process, as we went through different sprints, we would do sprint demos, show them the new functionality that was built, and then they would give us feedback in real time. Hey, we love this. This doesn't really flow with how we typically work. So we were able to make some of those in the moment adjustments so that by the time we got to the end of development, we had it pretty much nailed, right? And then, another great outcome of this was it really gave us our backlog, right? We had everything documented of the things we needed to build, what the acceptance criteria were. Again, really making sure the users were heavily involved in helping us define that. And we had some prior experience. Our sales team had actually worked with Mindset in the past and did a design thinking workshop as well and had great success. So we kind of piggybacked on that and did that for our service project. And then at the end, what was great is we had this high resolution prototype, which we're going to show you in just a second, but it really helped us to get aligned on what our minimally viable product was. So, we asked a lot of questions of our end users, if we deliver this, would this give you enough to be able to complete service orders end to end? Okay. All right, next one. So this just gives you an idea of kind of the evolution of these mock-ups, right? So it started, John, is that your expert artwork on the left there? I think
I wish I could draw that well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I can't either. But, it really starts with literally just jotting some things down to kind of understand. And then the low res mockup is really what we did on site when we were in that app house space. And so we kind of built up, what some of the screens might look like. And then what was really cool is Mindset was able to very quickly turn that into a high res prototype. I think the next day we came in, they had this ready for us. And what's nice about the high res prototype is it really lets you and lets the users, more importantly, step through how this app works and how it flows. And it's clickable. And, so they can really start to think. It's one thing if they see the screenshot. It's another thing if they're using it and they go, well, we really should do this before that, right? So that was very, very helpful.
Yeah, but it's always interesting to see, each one of these phases, you get more and more questions that comes out from the end users. So as they get higher and higher fidelity, you really get a feeling that they're really trying to use it. So yeah.
Right. Agreed. And so this is just an example on the right of that backlog, right? So we were able to based on the prototype and everything, really write what our user stories were, again, what our acceptance criteria was, and then really start to prioritize that into sprints. And again, doing sprint demos each time and making sure that the end users had full visibility to what we were building, how it was built, and giving that real-time feedback so that we could course correct as we went, rather than waiting until everything was built and then saying, what do you think, right? And I love this quote here, but it says, design thinking is a proven process that enables you to identify and clarify complex business problems and their solutions while building engagement and excitement with end users. And especially that last piece. We had a ton of excitement coming out of this, just, because they're kind of re-envisioning. They're so used to this painful using CRM on their laptop and just to see the excitement of what was coming and the fact that they had a seat at the table. And it really helped them, I think, become great evangelists. We were very on purpose about selecting people that were well respected, but also came from very different backgrounds. Some were very tech savvy, some were awful at technology, right? What didn't come naturally to them. But we had them geographically spread so that we kind of built this network of evangelists that would serve us in the future.
Yeah, I think one of the huge things we see in these sessions too is just the teaming that happens once you're in that engagement, right? Because these could be people, and I think it was true in your case, IT users, business users, leadership, all in the same room together for the very first time. They've never met each other in person, and this is a great way to just build that teaming approach.
Agreed. All right, so this is an example of what we built. Right. So if you remember, the high-res prototype looks very close to this. So that was really nice because it was a very similar UI. But you can see on the left, we have kind of the launch pad that I talked about with the different tiles that they can go into, and then kind of looking at their schedule for the day. And then it goes into kind of the workflow of the service order. How they can see the information about the order, the notes, they can select their equipment record, add parts, and do their confirmations right through this Fiori screen. And one thing I think that we were very on purpose about as we thought through design here is how do we make this a very linear process? I mentioned a little bit about CRM and how they had a lot of different paths they could take and they could do things in different orders. We wanted to take that away and really kind of force them down a single path. Now, there might be decision points where they fork off, but then they're on another linear path. And what that did is it really operationally streamlined our processes and gave us the ability to measure and see where we were doing well and where we weren't. Where before, if they had all these options, it was almost impossible to measure the process and the success of the process. All right, next one. So this one, I think, is one of the most impressive slides, just because our technicians then and today still have the option to go back to CRM to do service orders. And that's what they had been comfortable with for 4 to 5 years prior to this project. So this was a completely voluntary adoption for them to use the Fiori app. But I think what this tells me is because we had the end users involved early and throughout, and we continued to listen to their feedback and have that shape, future enhancement requests and how we prioritize our work going forward. We ended up with a product that they loved, right? You don't see adoption numbers like this if it's not a great product. So right out of the gate, we were in the 70% range. Very quickly went up to 80% range. And now this is a little dated. We launched this a few years ago, but currently 97% of our confirmations are created in Fiori, which is just unbelievable. Just a great success. I think it speaks to the whole approach of design thinking and how if end users help design and build this in a way that works for how they work, people love it.
Yeah, that's impressive. So the chart here kind of shows what those first kind of 12 weeks of go live was already in the mid 80s as far as percentages, and then you measured it again today.
Right.
Nice.
All right. So the other thing, I talked about kind of making this a linear path and really building some good solid logic into this to try and keep it to put guidelines in place so that users really can't screw up, right? We put a lot of bumpers in place. So what we saw as an outcome of that is some really dramatic business improvement in our key performance indicators. So when we looked at same-day confirmations, the reason this is important is when a tech does their confirmation the same day, it sends a communication, an email to the office saying, here's the work that Sally did for you today. It also will make sure those lines are completed on the service order so that we can complete that service order and invoice in a more timely manner and get our revenue recognized, right? So what we saw prior to Fiori is we were only running about 41% when they were using CRM for same-day confirmations. that jumped to 91.3%, an improvement of over 100%. And today we're at 92.4. So dramatically better, just because, again, it was so much easier. It's easy for them to do it in real time versus having, you saw John's pictures, they're getting their laptop out and trying to prop it on some piece of equipment and, do all this. And then going to one call resolution, right? So how many times are we able to resolve their issue on the first visit? We were at 46.2%. That went up to almost 70. And today we're at 72%. So significant improvement. And then finally, with valid equipment records, this is really important for us because we are a distributor and we sell a lot of different vendors' equipment. And we need to know what we're working on. So we know, is it under warranty? Is it under contract? And also giving our customers an accurate repair history. How much have I spent on my, x-ray machine in repairs, for example? So in the old system, it was very cumbersome to try and, number one, find existing equipment records. Number two, to create equipment records if they didn't exist for that customer. So we greatly simplified that, and you see the result here. We went up to 94.5%, and now we're running at 96. So much, much better. But really cool just to show how design and really being on purpose about how you build can really impact the business outcomes and make your business case. All right, next one. All right, and then this one, this doesn't look very dramatic, right? But what it is it's showing on average, when we did a confirmation in CRM, we billed for about 98.9 minutes. When we did it in Fiori, it went up to 104.6. The reason that happened is we had a business practice in place for labor where we charge a 1 hour minimum, and then anything above that is charged in 15-minute increments. But in CRM, there was no systematic enforcement of that or automation of that. So we just had to assume a tech was going to remember, oh yeah, I have to round this up to an hour or an hour and 15. In Fiori, we automated that. So we got this immediate lift, which doesn't look like much, but when you take it and you extrapolate it over a year, this was over 5 million in additional labor revenue per year. So pretty significant.
And that's really just from what the functionality of kind of the start and stop buttons, right? Where we're saying people can start their service and it captures a timestamp. They end their service, it captures a timestamp and does everything else automatically.
Yeah, and then it will apply that logic. So let's say they were on site for 44 minutes, it'll automatically round to 1 hour of billable time. So it just makes it very, very easy.
Nice, that's huge.
Yeah. Next one. All right, so let me just break this down real quick. So the bars going up and down, the blue is how many orders we closed in CRM. And then you can kind of see the orange starting to come in. Those are orders that were closed in Fiori. And what we see on the lines going across, the dark blue was our turn time for CRM. And turn time is simply how long does it take between when we create a service order and when we complete that service order. So you can see we ran about 20 to 25 days on average in CRM. When we went to Fiori, immediately, you see right out of the gate, we're at about 10 days. So significantly better. Again, when you look at the revenue recognition and being able to get these orders closed in a more timely manner, we saw a dramatic improvement there. Next one.
Since then, have you heard from customers that this is improving, their customer experience with Patterson service as well?
Yeah, I think the main thing we hear is just the speed of the confirmation notifications and being able, as soon as the tech walks out of their office, they have an email detailing exactly what they did, what parts they used, all of those things, how much it's going to be billed for. So it just is a much better experience, where in the old days of CRM, that might have taken a day or two, and they're saying, what did the tech do? I didn't get a chance to talk to him. I don't know. Yeah, so it's a much better experience.
Nice.
And these are just some verbatims. I'm not going to read these to you, but essentially in a nutshell, what we heard is it was way faster than CRM. Just to give you a little context, when we did some time studies, it was taking between 5 and 8 minutes in CRM for someone to complete a service order. In Fiori, that went to about 2 to 3 minutes. So huge time savings. So then you think about, what do they do with that extra time? If we can bill more hours, then it just helps you with that additional revenue. And again, there's a comment there about the linear approach, so instead of they loved having the bumpers because now they didn't have to think about what order to do things. It just kind of took them down that path. And then I think the final thing was just the fact that the common practice, and John, you probably saw this on your ride-alongs, but they would a lot of times wait until the end of the day, take their laptop home, sit at their kitchen counter, or you saw it during lunch, and they'll sit and do their service orders, right? So now they're working well past their normal working hours. With Fiori, because they're doing that in real time, they're saying, I'm starting service, I'm ending service, they're doing their notes as they go. Is when they walk out of that last service call for the day, they're done. They can go home. So that was a huge one.
I think the coolest one I saw after the project went live, there was, I think you or someone else sent a picture over to us that there was one of the service techs on a weekend was on a fishing boat with his iPad, and he logged into Fiori because he wanted to, because he thought it was so cool that he could use this new system and new thing. And I have to say, in all of my SAP years of experience, I've never seen someone try to do that in CRM.
Right. Yeah, that's for sure. All right. And then just to kind of wrap things up, really our key learnings that I would share with you would be you have to have your end users involved from the beginning, all through the process, all through design, through the sprint demos, and even beyond that, right? I'm going to talk about Yammer in just a second, but we continue to get some great feedback, and that again shapes really what we prioritize. And again, having those people engaged and involved up front gave us a great resource. So when we had to do hypercare as we were launching, the different waves, it was great because now you have all these end users that are experts in the product because they've seen all the demos, they've helped design, they've answered all the questions. So now we can deploy them and have that much better support. And again, just having them be evangelists. In the change management, I think it's so much easier because, it's built by techs for techs. So number one thing, tech sees this thing is coming out and knows their peers, had a big seat at the table. They're going to have a lot less resistance than if it's Blane and Carly. They know what you need, right? Well, so I think it's just having them know that one of their peers were heavily engaged in this. And then finally, Yammer. I don't know if that's something you have in your company or if there's other systems, but just essentially having a forum and we've kept this live. It's still going. We still get comments all the time, but where they can ask questions, where they can give us ideas for future functionality. And it really helps us keep a pulse of, what are the pain points, so that now we can write new user stories and really prioritize based on what our techs are telling us, not what I think is the most important, what they think is the most important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, so we want to save a few minutes for Q&A along the way here. I know, it's always fun for me to get to talk to, Blane and Carly around, how this thing is working, because a lot of times we'll come in and we'll do a project, everything will be super successful, but, I think the team here did a really good job at really tracking, what does Fiori change in an environment like this by going through one of these processes. And so I think, we'll open up for questions. Feel free to put them in the chat in the Q&A. I do see one of them in the Q&A right now that I'll just read out to you, Blane. I think it's for you. So question for Blane: were your pre or post KPIs, like measuring same-day confirmation percentage, consciously selected before the project began? And any advice on determining benchmark or ROI drivers ahead of starting a Fiori transformation?
Yes, that is a fantastic question. So we were very, very on purpose about what our success metrics were going to be, right? So here's our KPIs, and that had a big influence on how we designed Fiori. And I talked a lot about the logic we built in so that people couldn't kind of go off of that linear path where we didn't want them to. And so we very clearly defined, yes, we want same day confirmations to go up, we want all these different things to go up, and set those baselines and capture that ahead of time. and then actively track those as Fiori was going live. Are we getting the movement we expected? If not, why not? And starting to dig in and ask questions. Do we need to do an enhancement or change the way this logic works so that we get a better output? And then, I think, what was the second piece of that?
Yeah, the second piece was, any advice for folks on how to really look at benchmarking or ROI drivers ahead of starting something like this?
Yeah, I think that's the key. It's got to be ahead of starting the project, right? You have to clearly define what you're trying to improve, and then use the product and the design to figure out how you're going to do that, and then regularly measure over time as you deploy to see if you are getting that desired result, and if not, turning some levers. And maybe it's a change management thing, maybe it's a system enhancement, but turning those levers until you get your desired outcome.
Yeah, for sure. The only thing I'll add to that too is a part of our, a lot of the times in a design thinking engagement, when we're going through pain points and how we can look at this, we'll capture those KPIs then as well with the whole team. Like, hey, what are we trying to solve here? And really hammer that home to see what we're going to measure. But there's been a lot of times as well where we'll jump into business case discussions, right? Everything has to have a value to it if it's going to get approved from a leadership committee. And so luckily for us, Blane had already thought about that way beforehand. But that can also come out of a design thinking engagement as well, is just to make sure that we're on the same page on what we're trying to improve and what we're trying to prove out.
Yep. We did get another one, which is a great one, which is how much time did you as product owner need to spend during creation of the Fiori app? So I was very fortunate. My leadership saw how critical that product owner role was, and they essentially pulled me out of my day-to-day job. So I was able to dedicate probably 80 to 90% of my time to the project. And I think, John, you can speak to this, but it was extremely valuable because we were able to, I was right there. So if a decision needed to be made, I was talking with the mindset developers, with Carly, and we would solve it right in the moment. So it really helped, just I think, with the pace of the sprints and the development. They weren't waiting a week because I was busy with 8 other projects, kind of thing. So I don't know that everyone can do that, but I would say you should have at least half of your time free if you really want to be present and help the success of the project.
Yeah, and I would echo that, Blane, just from a kind of the more functional and technical perspective, having that product owner, as in you, to go to with any question we had, instead of having to go to 5 different teams to get those answers. It was huge just to be able to have you there and get those questions answered immediately, for sure.
What is the overall testing strategy, and how do you organize testing activities to roll out the features faster and at the same time maintain good quality? Carly, do you want to maybe take that one?
Yeah, so our sprints were 2 weeks, if I remember correctly. So we would prioritize our stories, and then we would go through a unit testing phase where the developers would test, I would test, Blane would test some of them, and then we would go through a QA phase as well. So our QA team would then test. And all of this would be done in these 2-week sprints. And then at the end, I think around sprint, I want to say like 8 maybe, is when we actually put the product in the user's hands and had them do user acceptance testing. So they got to kind of test our solution end to end at that point.
Yep, and each and every sprint from sprint 1 on, at the end of that sprint, we would do a move to QA, and that was key in making sure that shippable functionality was testing at the time.
Mm-hmm. And again, I think I can't plug enough how important it is to have users involved in that, because Carly and I might have tested and said, well, from a functional or a system standpoint, it's working like we expect. But if you have users testing it, they can go, this doesn't really feel right. I would have, intuitively, I would think this would come before that. That's the kind of stuff that comes up that really is helpful.
Right.
Absolutely. And I want to be mindful of folks' time. It looks like we're kind of right at the half hour here. Thank you everyone for joining today. This is such an awesome story for me to continue to talk about here, and I love every chance to talk to Blane and Carly. So I'll take it. But thanks again, everyone, for joining. And if you have any questions, Amy said in the chat as well, please reach out to us. happy to answer any other questions or any other things that that you want to know about the use case there.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.